welcome to our regulatory quarterly update on food innovation and trends, and particularly thinking about navigating the regulatory impact of COVID-19. So my name is Melanie Ruffell. I'm the Stakeholder Relationship Manager at the Riddet Institute, and we lead the Science of Food program, which is providing these webinars for HVN. So I'm going to hand over now to Michelle Cubitt. Michelle is a regulatory consultant with Smart Regulatory Solutions. She has a wealth of experience in the cosmetic, natural health, food and pharmaceutical industries. She provides strategic advice and helps navigate the complexities of regulatory requirements to help companies enable successful product commercialization and exports around the world. So thank you very much, Michelle. I will hand over to you right away to help enlighten us in the world of food regulation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Welcome everyone here today. As Mel said, this session is focusing on the different aspects that have happened mainly in the regulatory world and a little bit in the market trend space, thanks to the impact of COVID-19. This is all tied up with this is all tied up with the Scanning the Horizons quarterly updates that are starting to happen. So the first one is out now, and the next one will be out probably next month. And the idea of these is to give a bit of a roundup, I guess, around what's happening globally. There'll be different themes each month that we'll focus on, but an idea of what's happening within not just regulatory world, but also what are some of the key innovation updates and what are some of the trends that are being noticed at the moment. So that's all on the HVN website under the knowledge tab. And there's just an example of what we've got so far. So today there's three main areas to talk about. The first is just talking about the food innovation space and some of the key trends that are happening thanks to the different ways that people's lives particularly have been impacted by lockdowns around the pandemic. Obviously, there is a big change in the digital space as well. So we're going to cover a few things that are happening over there. And a big key piece this time around also is to do with claims. So this is predominantly talking around, say, not just health claims, but generally speaking, how can you do different marketing communications and what are some different options around getting key messages across. So what we've got here is some of the key features that have been driven by COVID-19 in the food innovation space. Probably the key to all of this is the first one, health and well-being. So now we're in a stage where vaccine rollouts are happening globally, some more successfully than others, but it is sort of starting to change the way that people can go out and about now, finding ways to sort of start connecting more publicly. But in behind all of that, there is a very key driver around what different products are doing for people's general health and well-being. What are things that people can do not only in terms of avoiding things like COVID, but also around, you know, what are different ways that I can increase my health? What are different ways that I can look after myself now that everyone's sort of been through quite different situations, something that's not really been experienced before? What are different things that people can do, and not just in a physical sense around health? Also, this is quite key too, where you'll see with some of these other key features, it's not just physical health that people were talking about, it is obviously also very key around mental well-being too. So That's where immune, gut health, sleep, and stress are all coming to the forefront in terms of just key themes that people are looking at, key areas that people are sort of thinking around what can I do to either help in this space or something that can give me slightly longer term protection, especially, you know, people are starting to move around a lot more. Obviously that means that your usual colds and things will start to increase again, or the general illnesses that come about from people gathering. So people are far more conscious nowadays of different things that they can do to help their health. Definitely vitamin C in the immune space has been very strong up until now, but one key nutrient that is also starting to see quite a significant increase is vitamin D. There is a lot of communication being published, both within scientific literature, but also actually within government advice around the need for vitamin D supplementation, especially with the Northern Hemisphere having been through their winter and having been through several lockdowns. It's becoming quite apparent that there is actually a deficiency potentially in the general population with vitamin D. So you're going to start seeing far more high-level communication in this space from different health agencies around people making sure that their nutrient levels are sufficient and giving them options around what they can do to improve any potential deficiencies in this space. When it comes to the likes of sleep and stress especially, a lot's been driven from general anxiety around the pandemic. What does the long-term future look like? You know, this might be sort of financial security, stability at home, anything in that's sort of really driving that space. Plus all of the change in dynamics around working from home and spending a lot more time in front of screens for work purposes, and all of the general juggling that needs to go on in that space. It's really driving a lot of consumer interest in terms of, you know, what is there available that could potentially help in these areas. And alongside all of that is the trust and authenticity piece. Certainly with all of the changes around social media use, definitely a lot more conversation around fake news, around what is the credibility of different information sources. This has filtered down into what is happening with brand communication. A key piece being, you know, are brands walking the talk in terms of what they are communicating through to customers? And it's across the board. So it's not just saying, you know, are you particularly environmentally sustainable, or are you, you know, picking on certain issues over others? But it's across the board, people asking questions about, you know, different social issues and how people are supporting in those areas, especially when it's now becoming more apparent that the lower economic end seems to have less and less. And also in the food space around both the integrity of products, you know, our products, when they say they are healthy, are they actually really healthy? What does that actually mean to someone? And the age-old food fraud piece as well, you know, making sure that when a product says it is something, that is actually what it is, and there isn't sort of some underlying corners being cut, if you like. And next to all of this is what is happening in the digital space. So thanks to a whole lot of things with the pandemic and lockdowns, obviously digital is now bigger than ever. It's how people are connecting with each other more and more. It's how everyone is shopping. It's how everyone's getting everything delivered. It's all via online platforms. So within the digital space, there's sort of 4 key areas if you like, where quite a few shifts happening. So you've got claims, platforms, shopping habits, and enforcement. So the interesting one with platforms and enforcement is obviously communicating to consumers is very much a large online conversation nowadays, and even more so in the social media space, as well as just your standard website. And within all of this, now that there is far more activity in this space, it has also meant that there are a lot more regulators paying attention to what is happening in this space. And I'll touch a little bit more specifically on some of the actions that are happening with enforcement in social media in a minute, but it is interesting to note that a lot of the enforcement action is ticking over into online platform providers and online retailers. So there is certainly a lot more activity within some of these players to actually own compliance and own enforcement of products that are going onto their platforms. It's not just a sort of a traditional, we're just a platform, we have nothing to do with it, it's all the brand's responsibility. There's definitely the expectation now that everyone should be aware of what the responsibilities are, and everyone should be making sure that compliance is being upheld. And then behind all of that, of course, there's quite a big focus on claims and exactly how those claims are being told, what kind of wording is being used, and certainly how else is it being portrayed. You know, is there a whole lot of imagery behind it that's also coming in to show what you're trying to convey, whether it's sort of storytelling and emotion, which I'll delve into a little bit further in a minute. But definitely with the shopping habits piece, it's probably quite clear to everyone that online shopping has grown and grown and grown. So more things are now available to be brought online and delivered to your home, and it appears that that is not going anywhere anytime soon. Certainly you've still got markets that are dealing with rolling lockdowns, and you've got markets that are sort of just trying to work through their vaccine rollout. And so it's quite clear that attention and investment in this sort of online shopping space is a key one. A couple of questions, I guess, that are coming from all of this with shopping online is when you're advertising, whose rules apply, especially if you're sitting here in New Zealand and you're advertising to others. The general rule of thumb is that if you are targeting a particular market and it's quite clear you're targeting a particular country, then you are expected to comply with their regulations. So if you had a social media page and you were just putting up information from here in New Zealand and it was just sort of generally speaking, then it would be enough simply to comply with what we have here. But if it was quite clear that you were setting up, say, a country-specific Facebook page, or you were doing a very clearly targeted website, say to the US, then at that point it is expected that you would be complying with that market's regulations and whatever their requirements are around advertising in that sort of space. And it's key to know that it's not all created equal, and some markets are obviously a lot trickier than others. So a little bit of research into what are the expectations for that market. A key piece probably being what are the various advertising standards groups expecting? Is there guidance material that they have that you can work through to understand which side of the line you're on, where do the boundaries sit, and where you want to play within that type of space? And following on along from that, obviously, if you're starting to ship product to people, when is that personal use, when is it commercial use, and when is it expected that you will have to comply with various market access requirements. Personal use, generally speaking, is a case of shipping from New Zealand direct to a consumer at their home address in a small amount. If that is the case, quite often it will be acceptable to do that with a compliant product. However, it does pay to know that some countries sort of have a very much set limits for some products in terms of what is considered personal use. Whereas other markets may have zero tolerance, and it could be more of, it's a lottery as to whether something gets stopped at the border or not. Definitely, if there is sort of regular amounts and those amounts are clearly not small, then it would probably be considered a commercial quantity, in which case it's expected that you would be labelled and compliant with that destination country's regulations as well. Also noting that some types of products automatically will have restrictions just based on ingredients. So being aware of where it affects you and where it potentially doesn't is always a key one. And for example, because there's China with all of their cross-border e-commerce regulations, so they're quite structured in terms of what is considered okay and how it's considered okay. So it's understanding all of that background information before really setting up shipping channels through to those particular markets. And yeah, as I was talking about social media and ads, when is it considered an ad and when is it not considered an ad? There is certainly far more activity these days, and it's very noticeable here in New Zealand late last year, early this year, thanks to their new social media guidelines from the ASA around what are the expectations for identifying ads, how is that supposed to happen, and who is supposed to do it. So globally, there is far more responsibility put on influencers now. They're not just sort of the communication piece in the middle. They are expected to take responsibility for the content that is coming across their platforms. And also there is far less tolerance, I guess, for claiming not to really be aware of the rules and not to understand what the rules are. There's a lot happening at the moment around education in this space and what people should be doing in order to make sure that they are very clear when they're identifying something as an ad. It's a little bit different compared to a website, because it's quite clear that a website is advertising a product. That's basically the purpose for the whole thing. Whereas we're in the social media space, it can get a bit grey as to understanding what the commercial relationship is between the brand and the person talking about it. And that's also one to note in terms of personal accounts for brand owners, especially small business brand owners, understanding that if you are a brand owner or in some way quite closely connected with a brand and you are sort of promoting stuff around a brand's product, being really clear about that being a level of promotion, because at the end of the day, if the purpose is to promote something in terms of trying to generate a sale, then it will be considered an ad. So just thinking very carefully if you're using your own personal accounts to start promoting brand content, when could that potentially cross over into advertising as well? And being aware that hashtags can actually be regulated as an advertising claim too. So it's less and less likely that hashtags can be used to say things that you couldn't normally say with a standard claim. A big example at the moment is, this is mainly more in the EU, UK space, but they've actually got to the point now where even things like hashtag immunity is essentially an unauthorized claim, because it's not very clearly linking to the approved wording for an immune health claim, which is a much longer winded and watered down version of it. And their stance being that that by itself doesn't accurately convey the wording of the original claims. So there's quite a few brands that are getting picked up just simply by having that hashtag as part of their posts as well. So it does pay to really look into what are the options with social media compliance, and working on a few guidelines in this space to understand, you know, what is the internal policy, and how will you as a brand go ahead with promotion in this space, and what does it look like, and very clearly understanding whose rules you should be complying with and when you should be complying with them. And if we jump over from there into a bit more around the claims space, because obviously that being a very key piece, regardless of where you are in the online space, it's definitely key to know the road to health claims in the food space. It's a little bit more structured, I guess you could say, for the majority in the food space versus the, say, the more supplement type space. There's a bit more flexibility within that one, but certainly within the food space, it's really understanding what that road is to health claims up front, so that if you've got a key message on mind, or you've got an end goal in mind around where you want to end up, you are completely aware of what that roadmap looks like, and how long it's going to take, and potentially what are the inputs required to get there. And that's where it can be quite handy to look at what are all your existing claim options, what are different tools that you have available to help you tell a story, whether it's trying to communicate some of the key health benefits, like I was talking about before, the immune and the gut health and things, or whether it's more around the emotion and storytelling piece, you know, conveying empathy, conveying feelings of health and well-being without necessarily specifically stating the words health and well-being. You know, are there different avenues to create even video content that looks at trying to bring an emotion together and convey a particular feeling in a way that doesn't necessarily overtly state a specific health claim, but does leave people with a feeling behind it of maybe they want to know more, or maybe they want to look into more when it comes to the products that you are selling, or the sort of message that you're trying to make within all of that. And then when you're talking the road to health claims, this is just the last little piece to talk about. There is sort of generally a stepwise type approach to getting to the health claims piece. So this is aside from looking at the emotion and storytelling piece, because that obviously there's opportunity to be quite creative, and there is boundaries, but certainly a lot of flexibility within emotional storytelling. But when it comes to actually communicating a health benefit of some description within the food world, it is quite clearly regulated for the most part. And so from that, you sort of get this pathway to the final goal, whether the final goal ends up being the end, which is a new health claim for your product or your ingredient, or whether you're looking at somewhere in between. But where it all starts is certainly with formulating your product, knowing what your end goal looks like. So if you've got a particular claim in mind, or you've got a particular story you want to tell, making sure that that product that's being developed, when it goes through all of these different avenues, will still end up in that space that you're after. So this is not only about understanding what are the key ingredients from a position and messaging point of view, but also underlying fundamentals of the product itself being healthy. So this is the low in sugar, the low in saturated fat, low in salt type things, because depending on the market, this can quite severely restrict the communication that you can have in a health space if your product fundamentally doesn't quite tick all of those boxes. And it could be through just the nature of the ingredients that you choose, or the overall inherent properties of the product. And falling on from that, obviously, is the low-hanging fruit, I guess, in the claim space with foods, which is around the nutrient content claims. So these are the claims for specific nutrients, about whether they're in there or not, how much of them are in there. And the idea being that if there are some good inherent properties of your food, like if your food definitely does have a good level of vitamin C, then you can look at playing in the space of at least communicating that nutrient in some way on pack or in messaging. If you may not necessarily be already in the space of an approved health claim to start with, at least you can start at the base level around communicating what you have and what's in there. And then jumping on from that, it's talking into the approved health claim space. So the link between the nutrient and the claim, especially around understanding, yes, my formulation is good. Yes, I've got good base levels of a particular nutrient, understanding what those minimum requirements are in all the target markets. It's not necessarily created equal in terms of what's the minimum amount. Everybody's got slightly different nutrient values to work with. So just looking into what those options are. And then, are there possibilities within existing approved health claims that could be accessed? So for some food products, it's as easy as, if you've got a particular vitamin or a particular mineral, you can automatically access something like we've got here with vitamin C in the immune system. The same goes again for vitamin D, that also has got approved claims sitting behind it already for any of those sort of recognized nutrients. And it could be that you've got one of these nutrients sitting in tandem with your key hero ingredients that are unique or innovative to your product. And you're just allowing this version to be able to tell the messaging while you're working on what your options are for your specific target ingredients in the background, which flows onto the piece around new health claims. So you might have something that's really special to you, to your product, and what is the map look like to be able to get a claim for that product. And this is something that you would want to look at almost at some extent on a global level. So we've got a specific way of self-substantiating general health claims here in New Zealand, and it's a process that you can work through with MPI. It's they definitely encourage people to engage with them if you're looking at something in that sort of a space, whereas in other markets it can be a lot trickier. It certainly can be a lot longer. Probably the longest term goal, I guess, would be if you were looking at, say, the EU or say specifically something in China, you'd really want to map what does it look like and what are all of those research requirements that need to be done to tick all of the boxes to be able to get a positive evaluation out of the regulatory agency. And it's not just understanding how much data you need, but what does that data need to look like, you know, making sure it's things like looking at the right endpoints, making sure that it's looking at healthy populations, not people in a disease state, as well as where do those studies need to be conducted? Are there specific requirements around population that a country expects? Or is it a case of, you know, as long as it's been done in a high quality setting, is that enough to put it all together? And then what does that final systematic review piece look like to get to where you need to be? Yeah, I guess that's pretty much what I was going to cover today. If there's anyone that has any questions, please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I'll just hand it over to Mel, see if she's got anything else.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I certainly don't have anything else because I think you've covered it all in a really short period of time. Of course, covering it all means giving the overview of the sort of requirements, the sense of the necessity of really understanding the importance of getting this kind of regulatory advice, particularly for what you want to do. The sort of general advice is really to raise the flag that there are great opportunities, even still in the context of COVID-19, but to get the sort of advice that Michelle and others can give early on, and to help plan your regulatory strategy to achieve your aims in the particular markets you want to get to, then you know, this is such valuable information. So I've got a couple of just summary points, I think, which or highlights. And if people would like to put any questions to Michelle, please start sending them through on the chat function. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things which I thought were key takeaways. And one of those is, again, just reminding us all, and thank you, Michelle, for saying this, that we've really sort of seen science in a different light through COVID-19, and it's actually been one which has helped highlight the importance of science, and science is even maybe becoming a bit cooler in some people's minds because of the critical nature of science and helping us to understand things like COVID-19. But science also helps us understand things like health benefits to food compounds, and helps us understand how we can develop better, more innovative food products to help address some of our global challenges, for example, how to create healthier foods which are good both for people and the planet. But in this world of COVID, we're understanding also that there's a bit of a focus now on fake news, which is what Michelle highlighted. And so again, it's even more important to work through the system to make sure that those messages are truly validated, and that those kind of questions and that kind of scrutiny, which could be there about, is this true or isn't it? Because now the awareness around fake science or fake science messages seems to have gained a bit more momentum, I suppose, with some of that messaging we're seeing around COVID. So that's a really important point, to make sure that that validation is there and done in the right ways. And again, with product authenticity as well. Again, Michelle highlighted that given the COVID situation, there's even more scrutiny now through regulators and enforcers than there ever was, and for good reason. But what that means is, and again, Michelle, I valued you talking about, it's everybody's responsibility to kind of uphold this great reputation that we have as New Zealand food producers. So once again, the team of 5 million is going to come into play, to steal some of Jacinda's words there. But it is very important that we all protect and promote the brand that is New Zealand Inc. So any one of us working in the food space, we can help strengthen that position of the way that the world views us and our products, which are meeting all of these regulatory standards, which again, as Michelle said, vary from country to country, from market to market. They vary on the type of media that you're wanting to use to advertise, the kind of messages you're making, the kind of ingredients that you're using. So again, really important just to get that advice early on, upfront, and that will help you navigate your way through your pathway to market and to success. So those were a few things which I think really kind of landed really well with me. So thanks again, Michelle. I think during that time, there's been one comment, but which is a thank you rather than a question. So I will continue to close the session, as I think it seems that everybody's probably got a lot to think about. And perhaps if you have any particular questions which need to be answered on a case-by-case basis or a one-to-one basis, you've got Michelle's contact information here. There's also MPI, as Michelle said, they are fantastic at offering that sort of quite general advice and understanding how to navigate through the regulatory frameworks depending on the markets. Obviously, High Value Nutrition Science Challenge is set up to provide the kind of support that SMEs need in this journey to markets and through innovation. So please contact HVN directly, as well as us, the Riddet Institute, as we're leading the Science of Food program, and we can link in and connect with advisors like Michelle to provide that support that you need. And we can do that very early on in your journey. So once again, I'll say thank you very much to Michelle and for everybody to join this session. As you know, it's being recorded, as they always are. Please sign up to our LinkedIn pages, HVN's LinkedIn, Riddet Institute's LinkedIn, and you'll receive the notifications of when these recordings are uploaded, as well as new webinars that are coming, new reports, quarterly updates, etc. So hopefully there is something there for everyone. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar very soon. Thank you.